Welcome to the Are We Idiots Show, where we question the status quo on society's important issues while mixing in plenty of laughs along the way. Now, here are your hosts, Mark Weaver and Rich Kroll.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Are We Idiots Show. We are your hosts, Rich Kroll and Mark Weaver.
Hey, Mark, that was great enunciation of your words there.
And put you first again. I do that periodically just to mix it up.
I appreciate that. Our listeners appreciate that.
Oh, I'm sure, because they know how we rank here.
Yes, they do.
Any tip of the day or words of wisdom, or are you going to do like you did last week where you just kind of went, no thanks?
Hey, some weeks are like that. Today I have a great tip.
You're not a zero today.
I am not
you're
a
10.
complete and utter zero. Do you eat bananas?
I don't care for them, but I'll eat them occasionally.
All right, a ripe banana is good. I don't care who you are. A ripe banana is good.
Not squishy, not squirmy.
Not too squishy,
okay.
but ripe, so it's also not that bland, like chewy either. It's got to be the right. Anyway,
Okay.
how do you open a banana?
From the top?
Incorrect.
Okay. I'm going to learn something today. Okay. Fire away.
If you watch chimps, apes, they don't open a banana from the top where the stem is. And tell me how many times, especially if a banana is not ripe, you try to pull it.
Right. It smashes the top.
Smashes, and then all of a
okay.
sudden you got to cut it with a knife or your fingernail, and then you're like, oh, I just ruined the top third of the banana anyway.
Okay.
Turn the banana over.
From the non-stem end.
From the non-stem end, simply pinch the bottom. The peel comes right off with zero damage, and you get an entire intact, beautiful banana.
You are adding value to the civilization of the world with that tip. That was beautiful.
Thank you.
All right, folks, just a reminder that we're in a new phase of the Are We Idiots show. And if you go to our website today or yesterday, under the supporting listeners page, you'll find a number of different sponsorship options. So we talked about if you're interested in advertising as a business, but as an individual, we've put up there platinum, gold, and silver sponsorship ideas. And then we're working on the back end on the payment part of it. That'll be hopefully by next show we'll have that all figured out so we can pass that on to you. But go ahead and look at the supporting listeners tab of our website, areweidiots.com, and check out platinum, gold, and silver sponsorship. I think they're kind of interesting. So I'll just tease you a little bit. So a platinum sponsorship enables you, and I won't even divulge the amount, but enables you to potentially sponsor an episode, be in studio with us as we record, say a few words that are important to you, have some refreshments after the taping, so it should be fun. So what do you think about that, Rich? Platinum, gold, and silver. It's very original, isn't it?
I might become a platinum sponsor. Can I do that?
Will your check bounce?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right, on the show today, Idiot of the Week. I have some good ones here for Richie. Then we're going to talk. We warned you last week. We're going to talk about abortion, and it's a difficult topic, but we don't shy away from that. And then we're going to conclude the show with some fun, hopefully. I'm going to give Rich a Would You Rather quiz, and that should provoke some interesting banter.
Very provoking sounding.
All right. So, nominee number 1 for Idiot of the Week, Richie. In celebration of her hit single, 7 Rings, pop star Ariana Grande got a tattoo in the palm of her hand, paying homage to the song and its music video. The star said she had the phrase, quote, 7 rings tattooed in kanji, K-A-N-J-I, a Japanese style of writing. The tattoo consists of 2 characters separately meaning 7 and ring, but together means shinjurin, the name for a small charcoal grill. Fans quickly pointed it out. Yeah, I think it just happened yesterday or the day before. And today, there's an update to the story. Today, she got it fixed already. So, yeah, you got to be careful when you get a tattoo, I would think.
Especially in a language you're not familiar with.
Yeah. Small charcoal grill.
Oh, it's funny you should say that. I once got a Whirlco blender tattooed on my back. I just thought it was appropriate.
All right, so Ariana Grande is idiot number 1 nominee. An idiot number 2 nominee is Rich. By the way, did you ever need money when you were younger? Did you ever need money on short notice and you had to go to your parents to get some?
Yesterday, actually.
All right. Well, a South Carolina teenager has been accused of faking his own kidnapping in an attempt to extort his mother out of $130.
Wow.
Emmanuel Franklin, age 19, of Sumter, South Carolina, was arrested for blackmail on Thursday of last week after attempting to carry out a scheme 2 days prior. The mother, who was not named by the sheriff's department, told deputies she was contacted by a private cell phone number. On the call, she heard her son and an unknown voice who said $130 would have to be placed in a mailbox on Bagnell Drive, or her son's life would be at risk. The mother got suspicious after she recalled that the mailbox address belonged to the residence of her son's father. Under South Carolina law, blackmail is currently defined as the intent to extort money or anything of value from any person or threatening to do so. If convicted, the young boy faces a maximum of 10 years in prison and a financial penalty up to $5,000. So not only is he so immoral, he's trying to scare his mom and get $130 out of it, but he hasn't obviously done a risk reward. For $130, he could cost himself 10 years in prison and $5,000 in fines.
That's the first part I don't get. Why 130? It's a very specific amount. Sounds like a cell bill amount, but
yeah, it probably was.
Really? What's his name?
Emmanuel Franklin.
Emmanuel. I mean, are you serious? Especially, and you pick an address of your dad? I mean, listen, was there Ariel Grande? You know, that's idiotic.
It could happen to anyone.
Could happen to anyone. I got a French saying tattooed on my thigh that I thought said, never give up. And it said, don't shop for peanuts. So I'm a little upset.
There was another person I saw, a tattoo error. She got a tattoo, Daddy's Little ANGLE. Daddy's Little Angle.
There is an angle to that story there. So
tattoo horror stories.
Okay, so at least the tattoo was only on her palm, and she made quick amends, and you're going to get it removed. Although that's a lot of pain to go through getting the tattoo on, and it's just as painful to get it off with laser treatment. But when you try to blackmail your mother, at least make it something worthwhile, like $13,000, $130, and you could go to prison. He is the winner of the week.
Oh, my goodness. And he probably doesn't deserve the dollar, but you're going to send it to him
I'll
anyhow.
send him the dollar. Actually, he needs the dollar.
Yeah.
Now he only needs $129 from his mom.
I wonder how much his lawyer charged him. Oh, boy. Like we say every week, Rich, there's an unlimited supply of idiots in this world.
That's why this show can go on for years after we pass away.
All right, so we're going to transition to a slightly more serious subject, obviously a more serious subject, and we're going to talk about abortion. And we've been talking on and off over the last year or so about doing a show on this, and it's a sensitive subject. It's a very emotional subject. And 2 weeks ago, I guess, there was the March for Life in Washington, and it spurred on some of the craziness that went on that we talked about on the prior show. During that same weekend, the Women's March. And that really made us think that we really need to at least address this subject. And we're going to try to do it as delicately as possible. But we're also not afraid of talking about issues that are important to society. And so we're going to go for it. And we're going to do our best to try to be understanding of other positions. I happen to be pro-life. I told the listeners that last week. But I have some real troubles with some of the pro-life as it's currently defined in our society. So any thoughts, before we go into the details, any thoughts about anticipation of talking about this or apprehension about talking about this? Any precursors, Richie?
Yeah, so initially we had brought up this topic months and months ago, and I was not comfortable. I said, I don't want to do that. I didn't think, we're not authorities on most of the stuff we talk about, but I thought this one was extra sensitive because we're two aging baby boomers. We're not women. It might be a little easier for us to talk about what's right and wrong about abortion without really having true experience or being a woman. So I didn't want to offend anybody. But in this case, the more I thought about it, it's a really appropriate topic. And the more I looked into it, wow, the pros and cons are equally irritating and infuriating depending on the group that's defending their stance, pro or con. So yeah, I have a lot of comments now. And here's what I would like to do for the listeners. I don't want to make this a religious issue. I want to take it purely on the grounds, although it's going to come up as far as, that's one of the number one is abortion, murder based on your religion. If there was no religion behind this, probably nobody would care. But I don't want to, because if you're Christian, non-Christian, Jewish, atheist, agnostic, Hindu, Buddhist, on and on, you're going to have rules and regulations within your religion if this is right or wrong. So I want to try to talk about this.
I would take issue with that because I don't even know if it does have anything to do with religion, because I think it's more of a moral issue, because even people who don't believe in God have morals, and I think most people agree that murder is a bad thing. The issue, which we'll talk about, is do they believe that this is murder or not? That's
right, but
that's really where
depending
the rubber
on
hits
the
the road.
religion, there's different definitions of moral behavior and murder or not murder.
Right.
And I think because this has traditionally been a, pro-life Christian versus.
No, I don't agree with that.
Okay,
because Orthodox Jewish people don't believe in that. So let's start with a little background for the listeners. Again, I think most people know this, but for the history of this country, abortions have gone on, and for the vast majority of our history, they were illegal in most places until 1973, which is the landmark case of Roe versus Wade. When Roe versus Wade went to the Supreme Court, there actually was 3 states that already had legal abortion. The rest of them were not. And this young lady, Norma McCorvey, was her name. Don't ask me how they got the Roe name. I don't actually know that part of the story.
Jane Roe.
They
wanted to protect her identity.
Just protect her identity. But she actually was the person in this case, and actually she never did have the abortion. That's oftentimes forgotten in this case. She never did have the abortion, and she actually later in life became a pro-life advocate. That's kind of an aside, but that's what happened. And so 1973 is when the decriminalization of abortion happened, with certain restraints. And usually, again, we're summarizing this information. We could go into a lot more detail. Essentially, there were restraints by trimester. And then fast forward to 1992, Planned Parenthood versus Casey. The law can't place an undue burden on women seeking an abortion on a non-viable fetus. That was the key phrase that happened in 1992. So, before we go any further, anything on the court history or that you would like to add with
when I
regard
looked
to
into
those
this,
two?
and I am also pro-life, but I have some caveats around that the more I looked into this. The first problem I have is how this even started. Right? This wasn't started by a mother whose life was in danger, or she was raped, or some reason that she felt that her rights as a woman were violated. If you look into Norma McCorvey, she was a freewheeling maniac, right? So her whole reason for pursuing this lawsuit was because she just didn't want to have the baby. Yet this was her 3rd pregnancy. So when she had a failed marriage at age 16, which left her with a child she did not want, and she ended up giving it up for adoption, or I think her parents took it. She then had an alcohol-fueled affair at age 19, which led to a 2nd child. Again, she didn't want the child. She gave it up for adoption, or I think it went to her parents. Then she turned into a lesbian and a pot smoker and a drunk, apparently, according to this one article I read, or several articles. And she found herself pregnant again, although she had a lesbian wife or significant other, and she was pregnant again at age 22. So to me, this seemed like a case of convenience, and she did want to get out of that pregnancy, but as you mentioned, The irony is, years later, she turned into pro-life. But right away, the premise was abortion for convenience. And I have a big problem with that, and I'm sure we'll be getting into that in a minute.
Well, yeah. So let's throw around some statistics. The reality is, and this is where one of the problems I have with this whole debate, and I struggle to find an appropriate analogy, but whenever you hear about this debate, it's always, well, what about the health of the mother? And the reality is that statistics have shown for years and years and years that 90 to 92%, and again, it can vary a little bit, but the overwhelming majority of abortions are for convenience, just like you're pointing out. And so, take the moralistic out of it. Take whether you believe that the fetus or the baby is viable or not. Just imagine if we were only talking about 6 to 7 to 8% of the abortions that we currently have now. We have about 900,000 a year, give or take. It varies a little bit, but almost 1 million abortions a year. And just for context, there's about 200 abortions for every 1,000 live births. So for pregnancies, about 200 for every 1,000. So wouldn't it be great? I don't think anyone, no matter what side of the issue you're on, thinks that abortion's a good thing, right? I think we all agree it'd be great if there would be less abortions. I don't think people are advocating for more of them.
They actually are. I've
very few. I mean, the lunatic fringe maybe would like to do
How about
that
the
for
entire
population.
country of China?
Well, for population control, I'm talking about in the U.S.
Okay.
No, I agree with that. But so wouldn't it be great if we had 90% less abortions, which are for convenience? So that's where I have a bigger problem. Is I think there's no lack of education now about what causes pregnancy. And unfortunately, people know that they can get an abortion, and they're probably less careful about it. So what do you think about that aspect of it, that the overwhelming majority, 90% approximately, are for convenience?
Here's the problem I have with it, and let's be real about the word quote unquote convenience. It's for birth control. So women using abortion as a form of contraception is insanity. I mean, I was looking at some statistics, and the Guttmacher Institute, not Gut Muncher, by the way, Mark, as you called it once before, 45% of all women having abortions every year have had at least one previous abortion, while roughly 10% of all abortions reported to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention were undergone by women who had 3 or more previous abortions. So clearly, it's, hey, who gives a crap? I can always use an abortion as a way to get out of this pregnancy. And I know you like outliers and Freakonomics and stuff like that. I found another statistic which was interesting.
85%, by the way, are unmarried folks, just so you know. And 90% are done in the first trimester. So just for a little bit more context for the listeners.
Yeah, apparently, after this Roe versus Wade decision was passed, conceptions went up 30%, yet actual births only went up 6%. So all the statistics around this seem to be around, call it laziness,
permission,
or who cares, or convenience, or
right.
Contraception.
Right.
And when you're using a potential human life in that context, I think that's crazy.
Right. So let's move to the real core issue, where this usually comes down to the individual liberty of, or sometimes referred to as women's health care, women's reproductive health care, or women's rights, the individual liberty of the woman to do as she sees fit with her body, versus the pro-life stance, which is, hey, that is a human life. What about the individual liberty of the baby? And, the follow-on to that is, hey, mothers have special privilege in society. Athletes never look in the camera and say, "Hey, Dad." They always say, "Hi, Mom." Right? Mothers are special in our society and our history, and the pro-life stance, and this is what I believe, is that I'm for women's rights. I'm a feminist in many ways. But
You're a feminine or a feminist?
I could be both, I guess, depending on the day. But I'm a feminist, and I believe in equal rights for women. But that ends because I am looking out for the baby, that could be a woman as well, inside. And I think there's a special responsibility for women who become pregnant. They know how to become pregnant, and they know how to avoid being pregnant, and they have a special responsibility to protect that life that's inside of them. So, that's obviously a big point of contention. And by the way, let me just say this: I have the utmost empathy and sympathy for someone who's had an abortion. I don't judge them. There's lots of difficult decisions, especially when you're young, if you're not getting guidance, and you may not have a religious background. You may have only heard one side of the story. So I have no problem whatsoever for people that have had abortions, and I don't judge them whatsoever. But it is when you become more educated about it, it can be a horrible thing.
So a couple things. I don't think this is a black and white issue. Now, that's why I made the religion or religious affiliation comment earlier, because in the Christian world, and I'm a Christian, but it's black and white. No abortions, abortion is murder, end of story. But as a human being who tries to apply common sense to many things, and I can't play God here, nor will I ever try to, but I can see where, well, if the woman's life is in real danger.
Yeah, right. If it was seriously a decision of, okay, you either do this or your wife is going to die, that's a really tough decision. It's gut-wrenching.
I don't have the baby yet. I have no connection to the baby. The baby's not born.
Right.
I have the connection to my wife. She's going to die, maybe.
Right.
Then, okay. What about somebody who's brutally gang raped and she becomes pregnant because of that? I don't know that I'm going to want her to have that baby. I mean, that's a tough one. I could see defending that. Or what about a poor child that they can prove is going to be born without a brain or without limbs or some incredibly challenging situation, both for the child and for the family? Now, we're all supposed to have our burdens in this life, but does it make sense to bring a life into the world under those extremely trying circumstances? I can see the argument in those couple of situations where I'm not going to play God, and I can't disagree with somebody that wants an abortion in those cases.
And I would just say that I totally agree with everything you just said. The unfortunate thing is that is the argument for allowing every abortion. And the reality is that 90+% are not that. You know what I mean? And so that's my point. From a practical matter versus a moral matter, wouldn't it be great if we only talked about 8% of the abortions that you're talking about here?
Why can't we do that?
Because we are talking about today, but I'm saying in society.
Why can't society separate?
Because,
all right, folks, for these categories just mentioned, which most people would agree with, an abortion is legal and you're allowed to do it. As a method of contraception.
Because we've been told, and I think it's an American holocaust in a lot of ways, we've been told for the last 40, 50 years almost, that this is a matter of the woman's body, and it's just like an appendix. Basically, not to be callous about it, but it's basically it's not a human life until it's born, and that's what a lot of the pro-choice group, and not all of them, the lunatic fringe would say. And what we saw in New York last week or 2 weeks ago, they passed a law, and now Virginia, they're trying to pass a law, and there's other places in the country where the law allows an abortion, or I would call it murder, right up to the point of delivery.
So let's, and I do want to bring this up and talk about this, because here's where it's sick to me. So I saw the video, and in fact, George Muldoon up in New England also sent me the same exact video, coincidentally. And there's that woman saying, yeah, you can take the life of the baby literally during dilation, right up, an hour before the baby's born.
Right.
Well, why? Because it's not an official human till it leaves the womb. Do you know how many babies are born prematurely?
I do. I have all the stats. So just so you know, 20 to 35% are born at 23 weeks, survive. 50 to 70%, these are wide ranges, at 24 to 25 weeks survive. And 90% of babies born at 26 or 27 weeks. Now remember, if you don't know, it's 40 weeks total. 90% of babies born at 26 to 27 weeks survive nowadays.
So then clearly, if it's definitely a baby,
Right.
if
we're talking about viability, 26 weeks, you're viable 90% of the time.
So, 4, 5, 6 months. Now, so that completely dispels that argument that it's not viable till it leaves the womb. So there eliminates a big chunk of this argument. That's BS. Now, here's the other piece. And again, I'll go back to my roots in biology, but when is something life? And you have all the arguments. It's when it actually is a heartbeat or a brain formed or it can feel pain.
Right.
And I'd argue life happens at conception because those two single cells that come together have the DNA imprint for a human 8 months later, 9 months later.
All you have to do is leave it alone.
All you have to do is leave it alone. Is it talking? Can it see? Can it hear? Can it play Nintendo and soccer? No. But if that is the beginning foundation of life, it's not a life like we know it. The other argument
Neither is an infant, by the way.
Well, that's where I'm going.
Okay.
They said, well, an embryo can't survive on its own.
Yeah. Leave a 1 month old by itself. See how long it lasts.
Leave some teenagers on their own and see how long they last. Right? I'd argue no baby.
We got some friends that are 50 years old that can't make it without help.
This is true. I might be one of them. So, when does a human being actually able to take care of itself? 13. I mean, if you left a baby in the wild, they'd get eaten by a bear. So, and only in the animal kingdom do newborns very quickly adapt. But even many species, it takes 6 months to 12 months for them to be on their own. So that's another BS example because no baby, no early stage child can take care of themselves and are self-sufficient. So I also hate that argument. But I'll tell you what. Here's where you just brought up the protection of the baby, the individual. I do see some situations where they may wish they were never born.
Well, that's one of my beefs. I have a whole list of pro-life
All right,
beefs.
so you go down that path, and
points.
I'll chime
So
in.
let's talk about why we have it. So we were in a group discussion many years ago, and a friend of ours said we were talking about abortion, and a friend of ours said, "Hey, I've worked for years with Catholic Social Services, and this is nothing about Catholic Social Services. This is just indicative of the same types of organizations that provide help for families in trauma." And she goes, "I got to tell you, my stance on abortion has been warped some by what I see people do to their children and the horrific treatment that they treat kids because they were born and they couldn't afford them, or they don't know how to be parents, should never have been parents. The kids get beaten, abused. I'm not trying to be graphic here, neglected, and horrible, sexual abuse. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that goes on, and you can understand, like, would that child have more pain if they never made it in this world, or were they brought into this world? So, before I go any further on some of the other pro-life beefs I have, what do you think about that?
I think it's real. Now, how do you determine that?
Right.
Well,
it sounds like in my mind, I've come down on it's two different problems. You got one problem and another problem. They're distinct and to be solved separately.
Well, I think if you see a woman who does not want the kid, clearly doesn't want the kid, maybe he got pregnant under unwanted circumstances, has no financial means to take care of the kid,
had poor parenting role models.
That kid could end up in some really bad spots. You just named a bunch of things that's going to happen to that kid. So do you want to bring that kid into the world to live in poverty, abuse, torture, neglect, whatever the case may be? So, it is a socioeconomic situation very often that, it's probably not a good idea for this person to have a child, especially or the child's blamed. So sometimes in these cases, the mother says, you're the cause of my miserable life. I've been screwed up ever since you were born because I had to take care of you.
Right.
I would have been, and now I'm going to take it out on you. That's a real problem.
Are you ready for some of my other beefs, though?
I am.
So, again, I'm pro-life, but I have a real problem with many, many people that are pro-life that, in my mind, need to have a re-examination of what that means. So, issue number one, many people who claim to be pro-life, I would classify them as really anti-abortion. And I would argue that pro-life is so much more than being against abortion. For instance, adoption and foster care. So if you're pro-life, in my mind, and again, good people can disagree, but if you're pro-life and you want to see less abortions, well, more pro-lifers should be stepping up to adopt children and or foster children that are born. And if you're not able to do that, you could be giving significant amount of money to crisis pregnancy centers, homes that help young mothers. There's all kinds of things that we talked about mentoring, for some of these people that need parental guidance. So that is a big, big issue for me is if you're pro-life, it's not just anti-abortion. You got to help the people that are already alive, and you got to be willing to be open to adoption, open to foster care, open to helping people that are having these babies in lieu of having abortion. What do you think about that?
I agree with you. I mean, I looked very closely at pros and cons from both sides and tried to put myself in their shoes, and it is a slippery slope. I mean, any smart lawyer could make a case for every single one of them, pro or con. And that's the whole problem with this overall topic. I mean, some of the pros were women who receive abortions are less likely to suffer mental health problems than women denied abortions. Abortion gives pregnant women the option to choose not to bring fetuses with profound abnormalities into full term. We discussed that. Women who are denied abortions are more likely to become unemployed or to be on public welfare, to be below the poverty line, and to become victims of domestic violence. Reproductive choice protects women from financial disadvantage. A baby should not come into the world unwanted. Abortion reduces welfare costs to taxpayers. Abortion reduces crime. That was fascinating, that an unwanted kid, they have statistics that say he or she is more likely to lead.
Boy, that's a really slippery slope.
That's a slippery slope.
I mean, you could justify murder and infanticide if you wanted to make a criminal argument. That's a socioeconomic.
But there were really intelligent people that went into justifying every one of those topics and categories I just mentioned. Then you have the other side. Abortion is murder. Life begins at conception. Unborn babies have a right to their future life.
Right.
Fetuses do feel pain during the abortion procedure.
And they're brutal procedures, by the way, if you want to look that up.
We won't even get into that.
Right. That's too graphic for this show.
Some of those procedures, sucking procedures and ripping procedures, they've proven statistically can lead to cancer in the woman. Breast cancer increases, and also higher risk of having a miscarriage with further pregnancies after that. Abortions cause psychological damage for the person that had it. Abortions reduce the number of adoptable babies you just mentioned. Selective abortion based on genetic abnormalities is overt discrimination. There are examples of people like Beethoven, and there's a famous. Look at all these famous people with disabilities that would have never been born that were geniuses in science or music or sports or art or whatever.
Hey, I had a son who had severe birth defects. And if we had known that he had severe birth defects, he would have been born anyway. I mean, and it was a tremendous trauma to our family and a tremendous inconvenience, quote, inconvenience to our lives. But it was that's the way it was supposed to be. And, he later passed away. But, we've also adopted a child, by the way. And actually, I'm kind of proud of this. Every one of my siblings have had a biological child and they've adopted a child. So the Weaver family is in the business of adoption. So we're pretty proud of that, and I wish more families were open to adoption because there's literally millions and millions of kids in this world that would love to have parents.
So I think the more I learned about this topic, the more I realized it's impossible to figure out. But I would like the simplistic approach I wish would happen is I think there are some real circumstances where an abortion is justified or makes sense from a common sense human standpoint. Again, not to get into the religious ramifications, but as a mean of strictly convenience and contraception, treating a future human life like it's a piece of toilet paper, I see how that doesn't make sense and is flat out wrong.
And to me, and I've been pretty consistent on this in other areas, I don't think changing the law makes a difference in a lot of ways. I think it's really about education and changing the hearts and minds of society. If they change the law, if they overturn Roe v. Wade, it would go back to states. Many states would have legal abortions. You could go anywhere and get an abortion, even if it wasn't law. They would have back alley abortions. So I don't think this is about preventing abortions by changing a law. That's not going to happen. But what you can do is change people's minds and perceptions and educate them about what an abortion really is and why it should be avoided at all costs. And that also means that support systems for people who choose not to have an abortion are in place, and a culture of adoption, foster care, a culture of life is built up and support services around them. I have two other things that I want to get to after you're done commenting. Oh, you have another comment?
I just summarized my thoughts today.
So here's my other beef with people that claim to be pro-life. Many pro-lifers are for the death penalty, and we could go on a whole other subject. I'm not equating the death penalty with abortion. I'm not equating the death penalty with other murders. But in my mind, people that are pro-life should not be for the death penalty. And you can make a practical argument that a person that should get the, quote, death penalty would have a lot more pain and suffering if they rotted away in prison for the rest of their life with no hope of ever getting out, rather than getting equivalent of a flu shot in the arm. That's what lethal injection now is. You basically get a flu shot and you're done. So I don't think the state should be taking human lives, and I think that's a pro-life stance. And my biggest one, which most people do not even think about, which I wish they would, and I'm going to get off on my libertarian stance here, Richie, is most people in this country that are pro-life don't even blink an eye if 1 million people are killed in another country in a war. And I'll give one example, the Iraqi war, and I've talked about this on the show. The United States went into Iraq, and whether it was 500,000 or 1 million Iraqis that we killed, it's somewhere in that range. And that was a totally unjustified war, and it was like, oops, yep, there was no weapons of mass destruction. There was no nuclear weapons program. Saddam Hussein, all the stuff that we heard as a justification to go in there, and we ended up killing 1 million people. And that breaks my heart, especially as someone who has adopted a child from overseas. And if you've traveled extensively like I have, people are people. And if you're pro-life, you should be concerned about all life. And if you believe in a God that I believe in values all life, regardless of whether they're in the borders of the United States or elsewhere. So I'm anti-expansionism. I'm anti-military adventurism. And I want to protect life unless it's absolutely unavoidable in war. What do you feel about that?
I feel like you just stretched this topic in 20 different directions and tied it all together very eloquently, although you did use the forum for some tangents here. But that's a dilly-dilly. I'll give you a dilly-dilly on that.
Do most pro-life people even think about that when people are getting killed in other countries?
But I
Why,
don't know,
though? Why?
I don't know that you can lump it all together.
Why?
Well, I don't.
If it's an unjust war and we're killing people, or even if it's not a war, when
don't understand.
Obama was the drone president, right? He was bombing, sending drones in everywhere, killing innocents
You are
everywhere around the
breaching
world.
the
I'm going
specific
around.
topic today, but
I know.
because people don't know it, they don't live and breathe it. Out of sight, out of mind. I
It's
don't
on the
see-
news.
It's on the news. Seriously.
Yeah.
What does the news?
I mean, I just think people that they're very Americentric or provincial, and they don't value other people's lives like they value Americans' lives. Probably in other countries they don't value.
True,
I
but
know, but that's just not
I
right.
don't
If
see how
you're
you tie
pro-life,
together pro-life with wars and other things.
I don't know. I think we should be thinking more about that. If you're pro-life, you should be thinking about all lives, especially if you believe in God. And I think anyone would.
You're not wrong, but you're asking. It's like,
Okay.
why don't we all get along? You
Well,
know?
I tend to go off and be an outlier in certain things.
You
so.
are an outlier.
All right, Richie. Can we ever resolve this? Is
No.
it just going to get worse?
I think as we get more liberal, and I now have to write down on applications and surveys what gender I identify with, I think it's just going to get worse as we get more clouded and
More liberal.
and more, hugging oil rigs together with trees. And we're getting crazier and crazier as we allow more and more anything goes if you wanted to, and that's what you want to do.
Well, we're in a long-term trend of liberalism and progressivism since the early 20s, so about 100 years. There's been some bumps of conservatism. Reagan, now Trump, I guess, is a little bit of a bump. But the long arc of history is much more progressive and liberal. And so
We're all the same.
I tend to agree with you.
We all come from the same universal vibrations. A rock is the same as a roach, is the same as a frog, is the same as a tree, is the same as a human. So we're all valued and we all don't matter. So none of this matters. Kill, keep alive, whatever.
A lot of these people, can you imagine if puppies were treated the way human babies were treated? There would be outrage everywhere. It's
Don't get me started.
We're back asswards when it comes to that. All right, so we have to move quickly. Our closing segment, Richie, but hopefully we'll be a little bit lighter hearted here. All right, Richie, so I'm going to give you some would you rather, and I'm interested in the Kroller spontaneous responses and humor.
I'm ready.
So you're going to listen to you have to give me an answer. Don't equivocate.
Wait, I don't even know what that means.
Oh, yes, you do.
So I won't do it.
Would you rather make $100,000 when all of your acquaintances were making $50,000, or would you rather make $200,000 when all your acquaintances make $400,000?
B.
So you'd rather make 200 and be make half of all your friends.
If that isn't common sense math in the bank, then I got a problem with.
Okay, so I would rather do the former because in a relative sense, you would feel a lot richer than everyone else.
I could care less. I'll feel you right now.
And if you think about it from an economic perspective, all prices would be much deflated
That
in the
is
world
an
where you.
assumption you didn't.
Oh, well,
you're equivocating.
No, I'm not equivocating. That was just logic.
I'd rather have $200,000 than $100,000.
All right, next. We're probably not going to agree on all these. Would you rather be the dumbest smart guy in the room or the smartest dumb guy in the room?
Smartest dumb guy.
That's me. You're the dumbest smart guy. I'm the smartest dumb guy.
Exactly. Okay. I'm trying to reverse roles.
All right. Would you rather date someone you love or date someone that loves you?
Date someone that loves me.
I don't know what to think about that because that would not be my answer.
Well,
if I had to pick, I'd rather date someone I love because they could figure you could possibly
but
change.
if they hate you or they think you're a scumbag or they're going to cheat on you, who cares?
But don't you have to? Wouldn't you have to love someone first before you would
I
date
love
them?
Farrah Fawcett, but she was a wacko. I'd rather have somebody that I know I can trust and loves me.
And you could care less about them.
Well, I'll
You'll work on them loving you
I'll
later.
grow into loving her. Yes.
All right. Would you rather this is a good one. Would you rather have a dog with a cat's personality or a cat with a dog's personality?
Wow. I don't even know if that's answerable.
I would much rather have a cat with a dog's personality.
Explain that to me.
Because a cat is so much easier to take care of, and then if you had the benefit of also having the dog's personality in a cat.
I needed that explained further. I'll go with that as well.
All right. Would you rather win $50,000 or let your best friend win $500,000?
I'd rather. Am I with my best friend when he wins the $500,000?
You don't get any of the $500,000.
I'll take $50,000.
See, I would do the other.
Because
I'd rather have a friend.
I could care less.
I could care less about $50,000.
Yeah, but
it doesn't make a difference in your life. $500,000 makes a difference in my friend's life.
Doesn't make a difference in my life.
I just hope it's not you.
Yeah, exactly.
If you were reborn in a new life, would you rather be alive in the past or in the future?
The past.
See, I'd rather be in the future.
The future is
we're not aligned very good on these would you rather.
That's why we barely are friends. The future has nothing but fire and brimstone and
progressivism.
Cyberdyne, more progressivism, robots taking over the world.
No genders.
No genders, alien bathrooms. I'd rather go back in time.
We're going to go to Mars and have new communities and new relationships.
You think so?
Would you rather have no one show up at your wedding or your funeral?
Wedding.
I agree with that. Because weddings don't really, don't get me started on weddings. I'm not a big believer in big weddings because they don't mean anything. You haven't accomplished anything, folks, by getting married.
I could get 400 people to show up to a free steak dinner with a band who could care less about me.
Right.
But if they care about you at your funeral.
I agree with that. We're on the same page. We're coming back around. Last one. And I had to put this one last, Rich, because I'm my libertarian roots. Would you rather be free or totally safe?
What does that even mean?
That's a question.
But would I rather be free or totally safe? So if
I think you'd rather be safe because you're a safety guy.
Am I a safety guy? All right, I'll choose safe. Now explain.
I would rather be free because what's life worth living if you're not free?
But if you're safe, aren't you free?
If you feel safe, what's the adventure in life? Because you always want a little danger. You want an uncertain outcome because that keeps you going.
We spend
That's why we're doing this show. We don't know how it's going to turn out.
It's not turning out well right now. I would rather. Don't we talk all the time about protecting our wives, protecting our kids?
No, you talk about that. I want my kids to be free. I don't want to protect my kids. I want my.
That's right. You're the one that
I want my friends to live like my friends. I want my kids to live life and be free and have adventure.
You're the one that wants to send all his daughters off into war if they,
if they so choose, if they want to be in serving in the military and be in the front lines, if that's what they want.
That.
Yes, they do. What difference does it make of son or daughter? What difference does it make? You think your son is less valuable than your daughter?
Go back to the show. We had this debate.
All right, that was on the gun debate, I believe, or the military.
85% of the people agreed with me on that one.
All right, closing comments, Richie. We're running a little long here on anything we talked about.
Yeah, closing comments. I don't know how I'm still friends with you after 50 years.
especially since we can't agree on the would you rather. Would you rather be my friend or not?
I'm not sure.
All right, folks, make sure you plan to tune in next week when we talk about, this has been in the news a lot over the last couple of weeks, when we talk about should the wealthy pay more? Many of the Democratic candidates for president are pushing policies that would significantly increase taxes on income of the wealthy and actually even on existing wealth. So big topic, lots in the news, lots of different discussion points. And as always, please remember, if what you see or hear sounds idiotic, then we're just the guys to help you sort it out. See y'all next episode. Take care.
Thank you for listening. Please download, subscribe, share, and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, and also our website.